Ever feel like building your own software is kind of like having a superpower?
Yeah.
We're about to crack open the world of PowerBASIC
Yeah.
and uncover the magic really behind those first lines of code.
Yeah.
Think of this deep dive as your coding boot camp. We're going to get you up to speed with the fundamentals in no time.
And what's really fascinating about this particular set of tutorials is how they break down the often intimidating process of software creation into manageable layers.
Okay.
Much like, like building with blocks.
I love that analogy. They even compare it to baking a cake.
Right?
Which is something I can totally relate to, right? You can't just dump all the ingredients together and hope for the best.
No.
Right? Those layers are essential for structure. And, well, for not ending up with a gooey mess.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Each layer in software represents a different level of abstraction, building upon the one below it.
Yeah.
This allows programmers to focus on specific tasks without needing to grasp the entire intricate workings of the system.
So you're telling me I don't need to be an electrical engineer to build an app? That's a relief.
No.
But speaking of tools, the tutorials walk us through the PowerBASIC IDE.
Right.
The integrated development environment.
Yes.
And it seems surprisingly approachable, I have to say.
Okay.
Can you tell us more about what an IDE actually does?
An IDE is essentially a programmer's central command center. It provides all the tools you need to write, test, and debug your code all in one place.
Okay.
It's like having a well-organized workbench with everything you need within arm's reach.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I noticed they point out specific elements in the PowerBASIC IDE, like the main work area, where you write the code,
Yeah.
the toolbar with its handy icons, and of course the ever-important help file.
Of course. Yeah.
I have a feeling I'll be spending a lot of time with that little lifesaver.
Especially in the beginning, the help file can be your best friend. It's like having a comprehensive manual at your fingertips,
Right.
ready to answer your questions and guide you through any roadblocks.
Speaking of getting started, I am ready to write some actual code.
Good.
And what better way to initiate ourselves than with the classic Hello World program?
It's a rite of passage for every programmer. And these tutorials cleverly use it to showcase two different sides of PowerBASIC,
Okay.
the Windows compiler and the console compiler.
So we get to experience the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
From what I gather, the Windows compiler lets you build applications with those sleek graphical interfaces we're all accustomed to.
Precisely. And then there's the console compiler, which is ideal for creating programs that are more text-based, often running in a command line environment. Don't let its seemingly simpler nature fool you, though.
Right.
The console compiler is a powerful tool for tasks that don't require a visual interface or for mastering the fundamental building blocks of programming.
So it's like choosing the right tool for the job,
Exactly.
whether you're crafting a beautiful piece of furniture or, writing code.
Right.
Let's start with the Windows version, shall we? I'm curious to see how this Hello World thing actually comes together.
It's surprisingly straightforward, and the tutorials do a great job of breaking down each line of code. You begin with compile exe, which essentially tells PowerBASIC that you're creating an executable program, something you can actually run on your computer.
Makes sense. So we're not just writing lines in a text editor.
Right.
We're creating something tangible.
Exactly.
Okay, what comes next?
The next crucial step is declaring your variables with the dimall statement. Think of variables as labeled containers for storing different types of data in your program, whether it's numbers, text, or other values.
Okay, I'm getting a flashback to my organize the pantry phase. Just like I wouldn't store cookies in a jar labeled flour, I'm guessing you have to be specific about what kind of information you're putting in each variable.
That's a great way to put it. PowerBASIC offers specific data types like string for text, integer for whole numbers, and double for numbers with decimal points, ensuring that your data is stored and handled correctly.
So it's all about setting up the right containers for the right ingredients before you start cooking your code. This is making more sense already. The tutorials mentioned a function header. What's that all about?
The function header is where the action starts. It defines a block of code that performs a specific task. In this case, it's the heart of our Hello World program.
Oh, so it's like the recipe instructions.
Yes.
Telling the program what to do with all those ingredients we just prepped.
Exactly. And in PowerBASIC, the first function to run is always called PBMain. It's the entry point.
Okay.
Like start square on a game board.
Okay, I'm visualizing this now. We've got our ingredients, our instructions, and we're about to make our first move.
Right.
What happens in PBMain to make this Hello World thing actually appear?
That's where the message box command comes in. It's a powerful little tool that allows your program to interact with the user by displaying a pop-up window.
Wait, so just one line of code can make that familiar dialog box appear on the screen? That's impressive.
Yeah.
I bet there are some specific rules about how to format that hello world message within that command.
You're right. The tutorials emphasize that the text you want to display needs to be enclosed in double quotes. Think of it like writing dialogue in a book.
Okay.
Those double quotes tell PowerBASIC to interpret the text literally.
So it's all about precision and attention to detail.
Yes.
Just like with any good recipe, those double quotes might seem small, but they make all the difference in how the program understands and executes your commands.
Yes.
This is already giving me a whole new appreciation for the code behind the software I use every day.
Absolutely. Even with just these few lines of code, we're starting to uncover the logic and elegance behind how software works. It's a fascinating world to explore, and we're just getting started. And the beauty of this approach, is that it allows you to actually see the fruits of your labor almost instantly.
Right.
The tutorials actually demonstrate how to compile and run your Hello World program,
Okay.
which is incredibly satisfying for a beginner.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
There's something so rewarding about seeing that hello world message pop up in a real dialog box,
Yeah.
knowing that you wrote the code that made it happen. It really drives home the point that we're not just writing lines of text here, we're creating something that can actually interact with the user.
Exactly. And behind the scenes, PowerBASIC is doing some heavy lifting. It's converting your human readable code into machine executable instructions, a process known as compiling.
Okay.
The tutorials mention that this process generates an executable file, the .exe file that you actually run to launch the program.
Okay, so it's like translating a recipe from one language to another. Except in this case, we're translating from PowerBASIC to a language the computer can understand. And what about that log file they mentioned? Is that like a translator's notes, keeping track of the whole process?
That's a great way to think about it. The log file is essentially a record of the compilation process, noting any errors or warnings that PowerBASIC encounters along the way. This can be incredibly helpful for debugging, especially as your programs become more complex.
So it's like having a detailed account of everything that happened behind the scenes, just in case something goes wrong and you need to retrace your steps.
Right.
Sounds like an invaluable tool for any programmer, whether you're just starting out or you've been coding for years.
Absolutely. Now, let's switch gears for a moment and explore the other side of PowerBASIC, the console compiler. Remember, this is for programs that don't require those fancy graphical interfaces.
Right.
It's a more minimalist approach, often used for tasks that run behind the scenes or for learning the core principles of programming in a text-based environment.
I'm ready for a change of scenery. So instead of that message box command, what do we use in the console compiler to make our hello world message appear?
In the console compiler, we use the print command to display text. It's a straightforward way to output information to the console window.
Okay, so it's like typing a command in that old school command prompt window. But I noticed in the video that when they ran the Hello World program with the console compiler, the window flashed on the screen and disappeared almost instantly. What was that all about? I barely had time to see the message.
That's because, unlike the message box command, which pauses the program and waits for user interaction, the print command doesn't inherently halt the program's execution. Once it's displayed the text, it moves on to the next line of code, which in this case signals the end of the program.
So it's like the program is in a hurry to finish its job. No time for chit-chat. Just get in, display the message, and get out. But surely there's a way to make it hang around a bit longer so we can actually admire our handiwork.
You're right, there is. The tutorials introduce another command, wait key, which does exactly that. It pauses the program's execution and waits for the user to press any key before proceeding. It's like hitting the pause button, giving you a chance to savor that hello world message before the window disappears.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. It's like the difference between a drive-by greeting and a proper conversation. You need that pause, that moment of interaction to really appreciate what's going on.
And that's a great point you bring up. Even with a simple program like Hello World, understanding the flow of execution, the order in which commands are executed, is crucial.
It's like learning the steps to a dance. Timing is everything. One misstep, and you could end up with a very different outcome than you intended.
Precisely. Now, beyond the specific commands and their functions, the tutorials emphasize the importance of developing good programming habits from the very beginning. And one of the most fundamental habits is adding comments to your code.
I've heard about comments, But I've always wondered, what's the point of writing something in your code that the computer just ignores? It seems a bit counterintuitive.
That's a common misconception. While it's true that PowerBasic doesn't execute comments as code, they serve a vital purpose for us humans. Think of them as notes to yourself, or explanations for others who might read your code in the future.
Ah, so it's like leaving breadcrumbs for yourself, so you don't get lost in the forest of your own code later on. That makes a lot of sense, especially as your programs grow larger and more complex.
Exactly. And the tutorials do a great job of demonstrating how to add comments directly in the PowerBasic IDE. They show how lines starting with a single quote are treated as comments and are ignored by the compiler.
So it's like having a secret language that only programmers know about, a way to communicate behind the scenes of the actual code. I can see how valuable that would be, especially when you're working with a team of programmers or revisiting your own code months or even years later.
Absolutely. Clear and concise comments can make all the difference in understanding, maintaining, and collaborating on code. They are an essential part of writing clean, readable, and maintainable software.
This is reminding me of those complex recipes where the chef includes little tips and explanations alongside the instructions. It might not change the final dish, but it certainly makes the process less intimidating and more enjoyable for anyone trying to recreate it. All right, so we've built our Hello World programs.
Yeah.
We've explored both the Windows and console compilers and even learned the importance of comments.
Yes.
We're on a roll.
Yeah.
Now it's time to unlock the next level of PowerBasic, variables.
Okay.
What can you tell us about variables, and how do these tutorials explain them?
Think back to those containers we talked about earlier.
Okay.
Variables are like labeled boxes, and they hold different types of data within our programs.
Yeah.
The tutorials do a great job of making this concept relatable, and they emphasize that understanding variables is really a key to making your code truly dynamic.
You're right. It's like giving each piece of information in your program a specific name so you can easily access and manipulate it later. Imagine trying to bake a cake without knowing what ingredients you have or where they are stored.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right.
And just like you have different kinds of ingredients, flour, sugar, spices,
Right.
PowerBasic has different data types for variables.
Right.
They don't delve too deeply into the technical details here, but they emphasize the importance of using the correct data type for each variable.
Makes sense because, you wouldn't want to store flour and sugar in the same container, right? It would get all mixed up and your cake might not turn out so well.
Yeah.
So how does PowerBasic handle these different data types?
It provides specific ways to declare variables with different types.
Okay.
You might use string for text, integer for whole numbers, or double for numbers with decimal points.
Okay.
Each data type tells PowerBasic how to store and process that information correctly.
So if I wanted to store someone's name, I'd use string, but for their age, I'd use integer.
Exactly.
Got it. It's like having different size containers in your pantry, choosing the one that fits what you're storing.
That's a great way to put it. Now, the tutorials don't dive into specific variable operations like calculations or manipulation.
Right.
But they do highlight the incredible power and flexibility that variables bring to programming.
So instead of just displaying static messages, we can now work with dynamic data, making our applications much more interactive and responsive. This is exciting. We've gone from hello world to imagining full-blown applications that can take user input, perform calculations, and display the results.
Precisely. The possibilities are really endless, and that's exactly the point these tutorials drive home.
Yeah.
They encourage you to experiment, with different ways to display messages, interact with the user, and manipulate data.
Right.
It's like they're giving you the keys to the programming kingdom and saying, go explore.
I love that. And the final thought they leave you with is really thought-provoking. They ask, how do other programming languages approach these same fundamental concepts?
It's a great question.
It's a great reminder that what we've learned about variables, data types, and program flow isn't specific to PowerBasic. It's a foundation for countless languages and applications that we use every day.
That's the beauty of programming,
Yeah.
The core principles we've uncovered today, from layers of abstraction to IDEs, the Hello World program, and variables are fundamental
Right.
across a vast landscape of software development.
So if you've ever been curious about programming, even just a little bit, I encourage you to give PowerBasic a try. It's a powerful language. And these tutorials are a fantastic way to get started.
They are.
Who knows, you might just surprise yourself with what you can create.
Absolutely. And remember, the journey of 1,000 lines of code begins with a single step, or perhaps a single hello world.
Nicely put. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep coding.